Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, William.
For our audience, Paul Okundaye is a serial entrepreneur, second-year student here at HBS. Before HBS, he's worked at Microsoft and Bain, doing a variety of things, but now you've decided to take the path of entrepreneurship. And
Yes.
entrepreneurship, specifically trying to provide a major solution to a pain point for entrepreneurs and for remote workers in Africa.
Yeah, that's it.
So what do the remote workers of Africa need?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to start. So today, there's about 5 million remote workers in Africa, right? And by 2030, projections are showing that there'll be as many as 50 million. So looking at like 10x growth over the next 5 years.
And what's a remote worker in the context of Africa?
Yes. So when we talk about like a remote worker or even a digital gig worker, we're talking about like software engineers, graphic designers, copy editors, digital marketers, any of these individuals that work in the digital economy and work for foreign clients. So that could be a software engineer working on Fiverr or Upwork or something like that. Or it could be someone who's an independent contractor on like an offshore like tech talent team. Essentially today, it's really, really difficult for these individuals to get paid in foreign currency. So for example, if I was in Nigeria and I was a software engineer and I wanted to get paid in US dollars, it's really difficult for that. So you could try to use the traditional banks. So that's getting what's called a domiciliary account. So domiciliary account is a foreign currency account at a traditional bank. I'm taking Nigeria as an example, right? But it's really, really difficult to get these accounts. So you have to have two references who also already have these accounts at your bank, right? And then you have to apply, and it can take a couple months to like actually get approved. And once you actually have the account, then there's also a lot of restrictions on how much you can receive, how much you can spend, when you can transfer money out. And even sometimes banks have actually blocked people from accessing their domiciliary account funds because the banks themselves have had like currency issues. So a lot of people don't trust putting their money in domiciliary accounts, and their systems are built on like legacy COBOL systems from the 90s. So it works really, really slow and also is expensive. So overall, like not a great experience. Then some people also try to use like more fintech apps that have come out that are trying to do this, which would kind of be our direct competitors. But so far, no one has really been able to crack the full problem. Either some of them have like really terrible customer service, or they have a lot of downtime, or some of them charge exorbitant fees, or some of them are not really focused on the full picture, because it's not only that these individuals are finding it difficult to get paid in foreign currency, they also historically have been excluded from accessing these financial services that they need, right? Like a bank, when you think about like a remote worker or a freelancer, is for a traditional bank in Nigeria, it's going to be very tough for you to get a loan, or going to be very tough for you to open an investment account, right? So customers are also looking to access these ancillary services as well. And that's basically where we come in. So we offer multi-currency wallets. So US dollars, euros, pounds, and naira. So we're starting in Nigeria. That's our launch market.
Is it, I believe, one of the biggest?
Nigeria is the biggest market. Yeah, definitely. And so that's partly why we're starting there. Also because my co-founder and I are both Nigerian, and we know the market the best. We have the most connections there. But we certainly want to be a Pan-African player when all the dust settles. So having said that, so we offer multi-currency wallets, debit cards, and the ability to pay bills. So that's what's included in our MVP product. But our product roadmap, what we want to really do is build a one-stop shop neobank for remote workers and creators. And so also offer things like credit, investing, insurance, and more, and essentially build this full-service neobank.
What is a neobank compared to a traditional bank?
Yeah, so fair question. So a traditional bank, right, is just like a chartered licensed bank, like usually the central bank of like the country, right? A neobank is a fintech company that's built on top of that bank's like existing like infrastructure. But what separates like a neobank just from another fintech is usually when you talk about a fintech, it's mostly a point solution. So for example, you could have a credit app that's a fintech, or you could have like an investing app that's a fintech, or you can have like a money managing and budgeting app, whatever, that's a fintech. But when you start to talk about a neobank, right? It's more about offering like a suite of services, right? Because when you think
Mm-hmm.
about a traditional bank, right, the bank doesn't only just do credit, right? The bank offers you a checking account, they offer you a credit card, they offer you short-term loans, they offer you a mortgage, they offer you investment accounts, they offer you insurance products, right? And that's what you think about a bank. It's that full service. And so neobanks are essentially trying to replicate, right, like building a bank, but as a fintech. And so essentially partnering with banks to circumvent a lot of those like regulatory hurdles that you need
Mm-hmm.
to operate in this space. Because if you wanted to just now offer all these things, there's a bunch of different licenses that you have to get.
Right.
So usually what neobanks do is they partner with chartered banks
Mm-hmm.
where the money is actually parked at, and then they're able to then build the front end of the application,
Mm-hmm.
right, and offer customers like these services, and then the bank
Got
can
it.
make money off of like the additional deposits, right, that are
Right.
being driven to the bank, and the fintech, the neobank, can make money on like transaction fees and processing fees and things like that.
What is the, as you mentioned, there's 5 million remote workers now in Africa, and Africa is only continuing to grow and accelerate from here. And you're saying it's going to grow to 50 million potentially by 2030. What's the market size roughly for it in terms of like dollars? You might say that is really like that these workers would essentially generate for the economy.
Yeah, we're looking at around like a $25 billion market across like the African continent when we talk about these digital, well, gig workers or these remote workers.
Hmm.
And that's really been driven by a couple things. So if you look into demand side, so the demand for tech talent in Africa is just increasing rapidly. So there's a global tech talent crisis, right?
Hmm.
More and more companies are looking for offshore tech talent because they understand that it's not enough only to look within your own market. And
Right.
COVID has accelerated a lot of that,
Hmm.
right? So more and more companies are looking across the world for offshore tech talent. And Africa has the most competitive wage basis, the cost basis of wage to
Right.
any other market, right? So you're not going to get a better price for tech talent than in Africa. Then on the supply side,
Hmm.
more and more young Africa, if you look at the continent, right, the average age in Africa is 19, right? You have in which high unemployment like across the continent, but also like the world's fastest mobile phone adoption rates, the world's fastest internet penetration rates, and desktop computer penetration rates. Right, so more and more of these young individuals are graduating or not even going to school and immediately going to the digital economy instead and upskilling themselves.
Hmm.
And they're learning how to be a coder, they're learning how to be a digital marketer, right? And so that way they can make money on the internet, right? Because there's a transformative power about the idea of digital gig work. They
Hmm.
can, if a young African can get access to a computer, internet, and electricity,
Yeah.
they can upskill themselves and start to export their talents across the continent and across the globe, which is one of the big drivers for why I'm building this company personally. But finally, there's also a lot of currency volatility across a lot of African markets,
Hmm.
right? If you look at Nigeria, right, the biggest market, like experienced rapid currency devaluation over the last year only, right? And
Hmm.
so in like these sort of like macroeconomic headwinds
Right.
are driving people to try to like earn in more foreign currency, which actually results in tailwinds for us. And so these two dynamics of global companies and individuals are looking for global like talent across the world,
Yep.
and Africa being one of the most competitive costs bases of talent, and more
Absolutely.
Africans are becoming tech savvy and participating in the digital economy at a rapid rate. And those two things are like basically forming a confluence, and that's driving the growth in the market that we're going to see.
Why hasn't, in your mind, why hasn't kind of this kind of functionality been effectively developed before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is the pain point there now? Like, why haven't a startup or an existing company tried to tackle this issue, right? Because I believe you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Gigbanc is the first stop shop,
Yeah.
first
So we are
for,
aiming to be the first like one-stop shop
yeah.
neobank, right? So there are, but I think there's a kind of a process to things, right? So this first of all, this is a very new market, right? So for example, we there are direct competitors already in the market. Like there's about
Mm,
two or three others that we would kind of be playing against. And they all have been launched within the last 1 to 2 years.
I see.
So the market is just starting, right? But all of them right now are only focused on basically the cross-border transaction piece, which
Okay.
is the like hero pain point. And that's what we're starting with as well,
Okay.
right? Which is helping individuals living in
Yeah.
Nigeria or across Africa get paid by their clients in foreign currency, and being
Right.
able to hold on to that foreign currency as a store of value, right? So part of
Yep.
it is that like it's just a new market that people are starting to look at now. Part of that is because of the technology, right? I think now we've reached a certain point where a lot of that like infrastructure of the banking as a service that people build on is available now. There's more open source technology. There's also more open banking regulations. So some of this stuff just wasn't possible in the past, right? Like especially across Africa, like Nigeria was one of the first countries to adopt like open banking regulations that can actually allow these fintechs who build on top of like existing banks and use their licenses and actually have that model exist. That's not something that existed 10 years ago or
Mm.
even really 5 years ago. We were just starting to see the start of it. So this past few years where you've had like more of an
Hmm.
increase of like the technology being accessible, but then
Right.
also like on a regulatory perspective, actually having it be possible.
Right.
That's why you're starting to see companies like focus on this. But then also, COVID has been a huge accelerator of this, right? More and more, like the demand for African talent has skyrocketed after the pandemic because more companies realize, wait, we don't need all of our workforce to be in the same place. We can actually have a decentralized workforce and hire people from across the world, right? And if we're going to hire people from across the world and a coder is a coder is a coder, as long as they know JavaScript and they know HTML and they know CSS or whatever they need to,
Yep.
it doesn't matter if they're sitting in Jakarta or if they're sitting in Mumbai or they're sitting in Lagos, Nigeria, right? And so that like paradigm shift is also what's leading to this renewed focus, or I guess this new focus on this like area.
That's definitely a very interesting opportunity and challenge that you're trying to tackle. Um, Tell us through the process of building your startup, Gigbanc. Is pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you started building this last year, I believe.
Hmm.
Tell us for the folks out there who are looking at, either incorporating or developing their own startup and idea, what was the process of taking this idea into actuation? How did you actually turn it from both like something that you had a vision for into a minimum viable product? What was that timeline for you?
Yeah. So I came to HBS like to build a startup in Africa. That was my North Star. That's what I wrote about in my essays.
Hmm.
And like I didn't exactly have the idea for what I wanted this company to be. Um, and so I think it's important to kind of like set the stage there.
Yeah.
So of why I even wanted to, or I guess we can come back to why I want to build this company because that's a different question. So
Hmm.
I'll just talk about the process. Um, so after the first semester of RC, which is like the first
Hmm.
year,
Yeah.
I had like was feeling a little down about like,
Okay.
okay, I came here to build this company, and
Yeah.
my idea was like, okay, I don't really have an idea, but I'll network with people. I'll see if someone else has an idea that I like, and I try to build
Okay.
it with them or be
Yeah.
a co-founder. And I quickly learned two things by the end of the first semester.
Good.
Number one, there's a lot of people who also worked in consulting and big tech,
Yep.
and you can only have one CEO, right? And so my skill set overlapped with a lot of people here. And number two, not a lot of people were building in Africa. Like quite a few of the Africans, like who came from the continent,
Right.
were usually looking to stay in the U.S. for a couple years and go back eventually, but
Hmm.
they might not necessarily be looking to build immediately. And so I
See.
wasn't really able to find anyone to build with.
Got it.
And so over the break, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to consult in my way to a startup idea. I was like, I have these skills from Bain that like I'm going to do what I know, which is I know how to problem solve. I know how to break things down into their composite parts
Yep.
and apply like a methodical approach to try to solve the problem.
Hmm.
Except the problem was, what company can I build? Right. So in classic Bain fashion, I came up with a two by two framework, which was my right to play and size of pie, right? And or right to win in size of pie. And what that meant is right to win is where is an industry or an area where I
Hmm.
have experience in that I know something about this, right? That it makes sense why I think I could try to build a company that could win there. I have the requisite knowledge to even be in the game, right? And then the size of pie is
Mm.
where is there a market opportunity that's large enough that's worth me spending 10 years of my life on,
Right.
like of my prime years from my like mid 20s to mid 30s, right? That this is something where also I could build a VC backable company in. So it needed to be a huge market.
Yeah.
So I'm not even kidding. I went on Google and I searched types of companies, like types of industries, and it was like I had like almost like 100 like type of company lists, and I literally drew like two columns, like right to win, size of pie in each one, and like I specifically focused in Africa, right? Because that's where I needed the size of pie to be at,
Right.
and so I quickly zeroed in on fintech. So fintech receives 50% of all VC deals in the African continent, right? So it's a huge market, right? And then also, right to win. When I was at Bain, I led the digital banking growth strategy for one of the top 10 banks in North America. So I
There
know
we
digital
go.
banking very well. Like I understand how it works. I can think about it from a strategy perspective, from a banking perspective as well. Like I did a few
Yep.
internships in banking as well. Like, so I was like, okay, I think this is a space where I can figure something out in.
Yeah.
So I spent the rest of the break just like reading a ton of research reports on like the fintech in Africa. So trying to understand where were the interesting customer profiles and also understand where was the white space and the market opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And also one thing that was important to me was, again, I came to HBS to specifically build a company that empowered Africa's youth.
Mm.
That North Star was important to me. I wanted it to be a company that could empower youth, and that had to
Yep.
be a core part of what we wanted to do. And I can come back to that in the why I'm building this company. But anyways, so I
Yeah.
started to zero in on digital gig work,
Got
right?
it.
Because I felt like, okay, there was really a transformative power, right? I mentioned before, the
Mm-hmm.
young African can get access to a computer, internet, electricity. They can upskill themselves,
Yep.
start to export their talents globally, bring money back to take care of themselves and their family.
Yeah.
And also, I felt that maybe there'll be less brain drain, which is
Mm-hmm.
less people having to leave. Just like, I guess now I'm getting into why I'm building this company, but just like my family did. So I was born in Nigeria.
Uh-huh.
I grew up there till like my teens. And my family moved to Canada, like in like when I was like 14 or so. Just to provide better opportunities for like me and my sisters.
Nigeria,
And
right?
yeah, we moved from Nigeria to Canada.
Yeah.
And like that's a whole other longer story.
Right.
But for me, I knew that I won the birth lottery, right? I knew that like I was lucky enough to be born to parents who, like, my parents were born in villages, like low income in rural Nigeria, hustled their way to the big city,
Wow.
like built their careers up from like nothing. Like my mom like ran away from home at 16 and joined the army and served in the
Wow.
army from 16 to 25, then used that experience to pay for her school because she could go to school for free and became a pharmacist. My dad like got into school on scholarship, hitchhiked his way across the country with nowhere to stay, just showed up and was like, I'm gonna figure it out.
Wow.
And he found a restaurant that let him wash dishes so he could sleep at the back of the restaurant, and that's how he put himself through school. And both of them like built great careers till they were in like their 50s.
Yep.
And sacrificed all of that so me and to start again, like, and move our family to Canada. And like both my parents were like working like dollar per hour jobs for the first like 4 or 5 years. These are
Right.
individuals who were like in their 50s and were like very well established careers,
Yeah.
right? And they made those sacrifices, which enabled me to be able to achieve my full potential, right? But I've
Yeah.
kept in touch with a lot of my childhood best friends, and you know, I know that I wasn't any smarter than them or any more special, had any specific talent. You know, even one of my friends, when I was first in math, like he was first in English, right? So it's not like I was any better. But when I look at how our lives have turned out, only one of us got to attend the top business school in Canada and work at Bain and Company and work at Microsoft and now have a Harvard MBA. That's because I had those opportunities to fulfill that potential.
Yeah.
But I know I just as easily could have just been a boy from mainland Lagos who didn't have the opportunity to do those things. And so that's part of why I wanted to build a company that empowers African youth, because I know I just as easily could have been one of those youth without those opportunities. And
Yeah.
specifically why I wanted to build a company that helps people access the digital economy and participate like and reach those opportunities, because I know that like my family had to leave our way of life, our food, culture, and people to access these global opportunities on this side of the world. So anyway, so that's kind of why I picked to build in this space.
Yeah.
So my next step was basically, okay, how can I like find out, okay, digital gig work, but what is the company? What should I actually do?
Yep.
My best bet was actually to speak to these people and to understand their pain points and to
Yep.
see what company could I build out of that. So I spent like a month. Now we're in like January 23.
Hmm.
So I spent the entire month of January. I came up with like kind of like 6 or 7 mom test style questions. So these are like open ended questions, like, what keeps you up at night with your job, and if you had a magic wand, like what's the 3 things that you would change about your like job immediately.
Yeah.
And so I literally just like spent time going on Facebook and Twitter. I would go on Facebook, I would look up like Upwork freelancers in Nigeria. Or
Hmm.
I'd go on Twitter, I'd search like hashtag
Wow.
digital marketer Lagos,
Yeah.
Nigeria, just to try to find these people online.
Hmm.
And every day I would cold message until I hit the limit. My Facebook account actually got blocked twice. I had to call because
Wow.
I sent about 600 messages over the month of January.
Yeah.
So it
It's a
took me that
lot.
long because I would literally hit the limit every day and I'd find the next people because I was like, I need to just talk to these people.
Yep.
So from that 600, I was able to talk to almost 40 who actually responded to me, and I was able to interview them. And almost everyone I spoke to, like about 80% of the people I spoke to, kept mentioning on and on about how difficult it was to get paid in foreign currency
Yep.
for the work that they were doing, for all the reasons I mentioned before.
Yep.
And also how they weren't able to access like these financial services, and they were looking to get access to credit so they
Right.
can get a loan to buy a generator so they can have constant electricity at their house so they can do because they work from home and there's no
Right.
electricity, and like, or they need to get a new computer.
Yep.
And so they need a loan for that, but the bank's not going to give them a loan for that. And then I also did a lot of research on, okay, who else is doing this, right? Like who
Yep.
else is doing this like
Biggest
in
question.
other parts of the world, right? So looking at like there were companies in India, companies in Australia, even in the US, that were like basically kind of doing a digital banking for remote workers in some way, shape, or form. So what could I learn from them? But
Right.
then also who was doing this in the local market, and
Right.
why is it not working, or what were people saying about them? So all the
Mhm.
people I interviewed, I also asked them, I was like, well, what are you using currently? Like, like, and they would mention the competitors, and I'll say, okay, what didn't you like about them, or what's good versus not good? And so I started to put together the picture of
Yep.
what this company could look like,
Mm.
right? And so after that point, when I kind of like was like, okay, everyone keeps talking about this same thing, so maybe there's
Okay.
something here, right? And so when I looked up the competitors, I'd go on Twitter, just a ton of complaints about these same things that people I spoke to were talking about,
Okay.
right? I'd go and look at their app store reviews, like they weren't really great. And
Okay.
so I felt like, okay, I think maybe there's something I can do and I can throw my
Okay.
hat in the ring to compete here.
Yeah.
Especially because when I was doing my research, one of the stats that I came across was that there are around 5 million remote workers, right? Digital gig workers on the continent.
Yep.
Right. And the full stat, what it says is that there will be and this is from the MasterCard Foundation. Also, I found another one corroborated by the World Bank, right? But estimates put it between 30 to 80 million digital gig workers by 2030.
Right.
So the midpoint is kind of like the
50-ish.
50,
Yeah.
right? And so I was like, okay, there's going to be rapid growth in this space. Like,
Yep.
almost all the customers in this space haven't even come into the market yet.
Right.
So if I can be there at the start, and just by having my hat in the ring, right, I can fight it out and like be one of those people when the dust settles, because this is not
Yeah.
going to be a winner takes all market. From what we've seen in mature markets, like
Okay.
banking is not a winner takes all market.
Okay.
Right? There will be a few, maybe 2 to 4 main players.
Right.
Right. And I was like, I certainly believe I can be one of them, or I'm sure as hell gonna try.
Got it.
So, but I was like, I need to test this, right? Like, I need to actually see, is this something people want? Is this actually a real problem? Is this something they'll pay for or sign up for?
Yeah.
So I got scrappy. I was like, okay, I'll just build a website landing page. And like, I came up with a name for the company, paid for like a domain. So I called it Gigbanc. And because kind of gig workers, bank for gig workers, gig bank.
Okay.
That's kind of it. Put the C at the end
Nice and
just
simple.
to be a little different. And
What's the name?
also,
Okay, fair.
and also like when you have like BANK in your name, there's a lot more things that you need to do to get approved.
Got it.
So that's kind of like was some of the logic that went into like Gigbanc, one word, BANC. So I was like, okay.
There was some, strategic
so there was some-
naming into that.
Yeah, there was. And so I was like, okay, I will build a website landing page for this, and that just says, Gigbanc, here's what we do, like multi-currency wallets, We have debit
Okay.
cards, credit, investing, blah, blah, blah. And I
Okay.
was like, okay, sign up. We're launching soon. Like sign up on the wait list now.
Right.
And the first 5,000 people that sign up will get a collector's item debit card.
Mm.
And so that was just a little incentive to like the whole point of what I wanted to see is like, okay, will people even sign up for this?
Right.
So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll put $1,000 of my own money.
Yep.
I learned how to do like, so I watched videos on Canva, learned how to make
Okay.
an ad, I guess so I made an ad for
Okay.
Facebook on Canva. I
Nice.
watched videos on how to do Facebook advertising and how like ad
Wow.
manager works and everything.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, connected the ad, like
Yep.
a pixel from the ad to like the landing page and like had the wait list, like email list tracking. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'll run ads for 1 month. I'll put $1,000 of my own money, run ads every day for a month
Yeah.
in Nigeria, and I'll see if I can get people to sign up on the wait list. And I'm like, if someone sees this ad and they're like, like, are you tired of like, it was like stuff like, are you tired of like not getting paid or whatever?
Yeah.
Like I can't come up with whatever like copy I made, right? But something that
Yeah.
would resonate with them. I'm like, man, if someone sees this ad randomly on Facebook for
Mm.
this company with zero digital footprint, literally all we had was like that landing page and a Facebook page,
Right.
and they're still willing to give me their email and name on the chance that I'm going to launch a company that could solve that problem for them,
Yeah.
then maybe that's a company worth building. So I ran those ads for a month, and by the end of the first month, we had 1,500 signups on the wait list.
Wow.
Right. So when you do the math, the CAC was about 70 cents, like for each sign up. So I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. So I'll stop there. That's kind of basically how I came up with the idea. And it was at that point I decided I'm going to try and build this company.
And for the folks listening in, CAC is customer acquisition costs. So
Yes.
$1,000, you got about 1,500 folks interested. So that's pretty incredible for a financial product.
Yeah. Also, digital marketing costs are quite still low in Africa.
Okay.
Like it hasn't reached the levels of mature markets like in the US.
Okay.
So it's actually like still pretty effective. And because of our customer set, right, they're like digital workers, right? They work on the internet.
Okay.
It's actually pretty like effective to target them.
Yeah.
Like you can actually like create your audience and actually specifically target your audience to who you want the ad to go through. So you can actually have effective ad spend as well.
That's very interesting and something definitely for people to think about. And you're doing this not just by yourself, you're doing this with a coworker, right? What's the mindset behind, for those that are choosing to go about starting a company or joining a venture, when is it appropriate to do your own startup as a solo founder?
Mm-hmm.
When is it to do 2 founders or 3 founders? Like what's the sweet spot or why? What was the mindset for you?
Yeah, no, for me, this was an important part because like, this is like my like second like company that I started. I also, I guess technically third, because I also started like a nonprofit organization that's still running today. We do consulting for African startups.
Okay.
And we pair students from business schools in Canada with business schools from Africa, and they work together. Anyways, that's besides the point. For my first startup, which was called Dine Easy, it was at the school in the city where I went to like university. We cooked and delivered meals to people in the city where we went.
Yeah.
But we had like a web platform where they could order the meals. And we would deliver it to them like 3 times every week.
Yep.
And almost kind of like on a meal plan thing. And we delivered them like hot within like 3 hours of when they were cooked. So it was never frozen, never refrigerated. You got the meal as fresh as possible. So in that company, again, all the early stages of like going through like the validation, the research, everything, I did all of that myself. But like I was just about to go into my 3rd year of college. When I started this, I just saw an opportunity and I was like, I'm going to try to build a company. And I was interested in entrepreneurship, like always have been, like even from a young age when we were in Nigeria, my parents like were entrepreneurs in every sense of the word. And so I was always involved in every small little side hustle they had, like whether it was like they had a hat shop, a bakery, a restaurant, a catfish farm. So anyways, when I wanted to launch this, I decided I didn't want to do it alone because I already had so much going on with school. And I felt like, okay, it would be nice to have someone to work with. But I was not careful about picking my co-founder and I got burnt like really bad. Like my co-founder like ended up like some of it was like he basically ended up like dropping out of the company like a month before we launched. Part of it was due to health issues that he had, but also besides the health issues, all the stuff that he was supposed to be working on, he didn't actually do.
Mm.
And because we were friends, I just approached him because like he was a good friend of mine. I'm like, oh, like I like this guy. We're friends. We get along. Like, do you want to build this company with me? I didn't really think about, okay, what am I bringing to the table in skill sets? What
Yeah.
does he bring into the table in skill sets? How are we measuring success for this? Like, what does good
Right.
actually look like for this venture? How are we going to divide up the roles? How are we
Yeah.
going to divide up the equity? Does it actually make sense? I
Right.
didn't think about any of that. I was just like, oh, that's my boy. Let's do this together.
Right.
And then it turns out that all the stuff he was supposed to be doing, he didn't do any of it. And all the
Wow.
updates he was giving me were basically falsified. And then he
Wow.
had health issues that caused him, which was sad, but he had health issues that caused him to drop out. But basically, a month before we were about to launch, we had already hired staff. And like, I find out, like, for example, one of the biggest things, he was supposed to get our delivery truck. So we didn't have a delivery truck, and we're doing a
That's
food
more.
delivery
Right.
company. So
Right.
you
Right.
don't have a company, right? And like, I was able to figure it out. We delayed launch and everything, and I grew the company to a point where we were doing 100K ARR. I was managing about 30 people. This is all
Yeah.
in college, and we were
Right.
breaking even by the time I graduated. But I decided to stop the company because I got the lessons that I wanted to out of it. But
Fair.
one of the primary lessons being be careful about picking your co-founder. So, and also the fact that I had to do it alone. I wanted a co-founder, and that didn't happen. And I
Yeah.
had to go through doing that business alone for 2 years. It's super lonely. Like, entrepreneurship is a lonely grind, right? And I
Yeah.
think having someone to share those, I think like the highs are intoxicating and the lows are so crushing. And it's good to have someone else with you to balance things out.
Yeah.
And so I think I sorely missed that, but I knew I was going to be really, really careful this time about like who I actually like. So I knew for sure I didn't want to do this alone because it
Yep.
fucking sucked. Sorry, I don't know if this is a P. Sorry, I might
No.
have to
Not to worry.
scrap
Not
that
to
out.
worry.
But yeah, it really sucked like doing this alone. And so this time, basically where I left off the story, actually the next step was I was like, okay, I've done the idea like generation. I've
Yeah.
validated demand. I think I'm going to build this company. I need someone to build it with. But I'm once bitten to twice shy, so I was really careful. So I came up with a list of like, okay, this is like what I'm looking for in a co-founder, and like these are like
Yep.
the value that I think like they need to add. Like, it needs to be someone where it makes sense our division of roles, right? Like, I'm a CEO and I'm looking for a CTO, and I'm looking for someone who has experience building in this space,
Yeah.
someone who has an alignment on like the mission with me. Again, that mission of empowering African youth, like it actually really believes in that. And like that's what this company is about, and every tenet of what we want to do.
Yeah.
And also the vision of building that Pan African like full service neobank who believes that that's something that has value, that's something that's possible, and that's something that they want to do and can do.
Yeah.
Also, personal values as well. Someone who we actually have the same worldview is really important to me. We live in the same version of reality, especially in this post-truth world that we're
Yeah.
in.
It's
I
fair.
need to make sure we're both living in the same version of reality. We see things the same way. We have the same family values, like integrity,
Yep.
hard work, honesty, transparency. These are things that I believe are really important. So, because this is a marriage, right? I was like, basically, I'm getting into the mindset that, okay, this person that I'm gonna get into, this is like a
Yep.
marriage, right? Like
Yep.
it's gonna last 5, 10, 15 years.
Right.
Right? That's long. Like 15 years is longer than the average marriage lasts. Like half marriages
Definitely.
end up in divorce. So I'm like, I need to actually really give this that reverence, right? So I reached out through my networks. I typed up a blurb that basically said, "Hey, look, I'm Paul. I'm building this company, like excellent, like serial entrepreneur,
Yep.
like ex Bain, ex Microsoft, led digital bank and growth strategy at Bain. Like the company's Gigbanc. We want to build a one-stop shop neobank for remote workers in Africa. Here's what we've done in a month. We were able to build our wait list to 1.5K,
Wow.
and I'm looking
Yeah.
for like a technical co-founder to build this with.
Got it.
So I also, because I wanted to make sure that whoever was joining also felt like they could see the value I was bringing, like clearly. Like I didn't want it to be like, oh, you just want to like technical co. Because this is the classic, right? MBA going looking for a technical co-founder, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I was bringing. It was like, look, this is happening whether you come or not. Like I've done the
Right.
research. I've spoken to over 40 people.
Yep.
We've gotten a 1.5K on our wait list. This is real and it's happening, right? So I've sent that message through my networks to like all the people I could think of like, hey, if this is you, message me.
Yep.
And if you know who this is, send this message to them. So
Mhm.
through that, over like about like 2 weeks or so, I got like 5 referrals. And so with those referrals, I interviewed all of them basically with this kind of rubric that I just like mentioned. And I
Yeah.
was looking for like, okay, who's going to be the right person?
Right.
And I wasn't going to force it. If I didn't find the right person from those 5 people, I was going to go back to the drawing board, figure it out. Maybe I just like raise a little bit of money and hire an engineering team to build the MVP and
Mm.
don't have a, and I do it alone. I was like, I would rather go with the right person because I know I got burnt bad last time.
Right.
But this guy got really lucky. Like we really connected on all the things that I mentioned. And also it was just really clear what we were both bringing to the table. So
Mhm.
like myself, like the hustler, right? Like ex-entrepreneur, strategy experience, like Harvard MBA with like a global network that I could tap into
Yeah.
and also global perspective and professionalism on how to do business, but also an ex like entrepreneur and himself. So my co-founder, Baba Tokwe. So
Shout out.
he was shout out Baba Tokwe. So he was like has over a decade of experience leading technology teams across the continent, right? So he was like he graduated with his engineering degree from one of the top universities in Nigeria. Then was built us with like worked at a couple different like startups.
Yeah.
Then finally was the hired as the head of engineering for all of Africa for Fair Money. Fair Money is the most downloaded fintech app and digital bank app in Nigeria.
There we go.
Then he was hired as the CTO of Gokada. Gokada is the number one motorcycle gig economy logistics platform.
Good.
And then he was hired as the CTO of Traction Apps. And Traction Apps is a fast growing VC backed
Mhm.
SMB financing startup. So they work with mom and pop businesses to do like loans, point of sale devices, things like that. So this is a
A
founder
lot of great
who's built fintech
experiences.
experience, built gig economy experience, but also himself had worked as a freelancer on the side and had used all these different products on the market and knew they didn't work and saw the promise. And he himself had been thinking about something like this. And so he was like, man, when he saw my like my message that his friend forwarded to him, our mutual friend sent to him, he
Yeah.
was like, it's crazy because this is literally all the things I've been thinking about. And that it was just like what he said to me was that like, man, it was kind of like God did it because like he'd just been thinking about this stuff. So we connected, and then I was also very careful this time around.
Yeah.
So I told them we were gonna have a few meetings, and each meeting would be a few hours long. Like we booked like 3 hours each time,
Yeah.
and it was a theme for each one. So one meeting we just talked about like each other, get to know each other, like where did we grow up, what's our family like, and like just like how do we gel. Another meeting was completely focused on okay, what are we both going to bring to the table,
Yep.
like how are we going to divide the roles and who's going to be responsible for what, like. And then another
Right.
meeting was just like okay, what is the mission for this company, the vision for this company, what does good look like what is the culture that we want to build, and we spent hours talking about that. Then another one was like okay, personal values, right? Like, so we had like, and so before each of these meetings,
Yep.
I told him like what the theme for the meeting would be. And our goal was like, we needed to send each other questions beforehand. So
Mhm.
we both had homework to come up with questions, and we send each other the questions so we come prepared. And when we both answer each question. So I came up with like 10 questions for each meeting. He came up with 10. So
Mhm.
I would say the question, I would say my answer, then he say his answer. And he say the next question from his side, say his answer, then I say my answer. So when we kind of did that for all these themes, up to the last one, I think the last meeting was okay, how are we going to split equity and like stuff like that?
That's the tough question. Yeah.
That's a tough question. So all of this happened over like a month. Kind of every week we were doing like one meeting. And then when we were comfortable, we're like, okay, we'll build this company together. And so that was actually about a year ago, like April,
Mhm.
was when all of this stuff happened, which him and I were just reminiscing because our private beta just went live last week. And I like went back in my WhatsApp to scroll to see through kind of like where we
1 year later.
started.
Yeah.
And 1 year later. So yeah. So that's kind of like I guess my co-founder story.
Yeah. Well, we got to the last segment, which I know we'll keep short, but you've just launched your closed beta. You've had this wait list now that had grown from 1.5 thousand people on the wait list to 10,000 people to experiment with, and you've launched this MVP, minimum viable
Mhm.
product, and you have a whole team now behind it as well. tell us about the runway for you in the future. You've raised so far now, I believe, 300,000 or so, give or take, sort
Yeah.
of like angel investors on, pretty good, decent 7-figure valuation. But now you're aiming for a runway for the next year. What does that look like?
Yeah. So in terms of kind of like the so far, so as I mentioned, we just went live with our private beta last week. We have about 200 users in the beta application right now. And yeah, as you mentioned, we have about 10,000 on the wait list. The goal is over the next month to kind of like basically preload people on and like a little in little waves or one wave every week just to make sure everything's holding up properly
Right.
before we launch publicly. And then we want to launch publicly, hopefully convert because again, there's a difference between a wait list and active users,
Right. They
so
might not sign up.
convert as many people as possible from that wait list into active users
Right.
within the first like month, and then go live to the full market by the end of April. Then the goal is also this month we're raising 200K angel extension round.
Okay.
And essentially, I've had like a lot of interest from friends here at HBS, from Bain, from Microsoft. So I also got to pitch at there's a demo day at HBS that HBS has for startups here. I was selected to pitch at that, and also got connected to some investors there. So decided to just add another 200K in our angel extension to bring it to 500 total.
Yep.
So if anyone's listening, feel free to shoot me.
If you believe in the future of Africa,
exactly,
you want to invest.
So that'll close by the end of this month. And then the goal is to grow rapidly over the next few months and put us in a good position to raise our basically first pre-seed round in August. The hope is that we can raise about $2 million in that round. And then after that, continue to like just scale on the product. So right now, the MVP application that we have, our functionality has multi-currency wallets. So US dollars, euros, pounds, and Naira.
Okay.
With the ability for people to get paid via bank transfer, or they can send a payment link. They can get paid via card. We also have like debit cards as well. So there's a virtual debit card for all those currencies, and also a physical Naira debit card that they can use to basically pull money out at the ATM, pay for things at a POS at a restaurant or whatever it is. And also bill payments. So they can basically, through the app right now, they can pay for their like phone bill, electricity bill, utility bill, cable bill, etc. That's kind of phase one. What we want to do after we raise that pre-seed is start to enter the second phase of our product roadmap and start to build that one-stop shop neobank, right? So offering things like credit, insurance, investing, and more. Probably the main first product would be credit. I think that would kind of be the first focus. And that'll kind of take us over the next like year or two or so. After that, we also probably want to like essentially look at the business side of things. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of companies that are trying to like hire remote workers outside of Africa. We're starting with focusing on the remote workers themselves, right? But there's a huge opportunity, and essentially what we want to build is Deal for Africa, right? And we want to offer a business suite of products, whether it's like contract services, employee of record services, payroll services, to these companies who are hiring a lot of these remote workers and contractors out of the continent, right? And then finally, after a few years, what we want to do is vertically integrate our banking stack, right? So get our own licenses, build our own rails, which will vastly unlock profitability for us, improve reliability in our product. And then also we think that there will be an opportunity to essentially build banking as a service products, because once we build our own rails and infrastructure, we can actually look for opportunities to build banking as a service products and embedded finance products that we can sell to other startups and also mature companies that are looking to digitize. So that's kind of like the kind of like multi-year roadmap for where we're headed with Gigbanc. But it's just day one now.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you have a very clear and ambitious vision for your second/third startup venture as you're about to graduate HBS in just about a month or two.
Yeah, very crazy. Actually, classes end in 2 weeks, which is nuts.
That is. Yeah. Well, for our audience, thank you very much, Paul, for joining us and sharing a little bit both about yourself and this latest exciting venture. And I will include the link into the description of this episode for those that might be interested in learning more about your startup, and for those that might potentially be interested in investing in the angel extension round as well. whenever you hear it. But this episode's going out in April 2024, so it might be
Yeah.
closed if you listen
We'll
to a
find
much
out.
later
Just
date.
send me. I think William will put my contact information, my email, and if anyone is interested, you can shoot me an email, and then I can forward it the details.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, William.